My name is Alexis Carter, and that day was supposed to be the happiest of my life. The church glowed beneath golden sunlight. Over 250 guests smiled as they waited for me to step into a perfect future. But as the minister was about to read the vows, a scream tore through the air. "Stop. I'm pregnant, and the groom is the father." The voice belonged to none other than Madison, my maid of honor and childhood best friend. The entire room fell silent, every eye locking on me. Put yourself in my shoes. If your best friend stood up and shattered your wedding, how would you react? Leave a comment and let me know what you would have done. Hit like and subscribe to the channel to hear the full story, because what happened next went far beyond anything you've ever seen in a nightmare. Madison and I grew up together in a small Texas town. My house was 3 doors down from hers, and we went to preschool together, joined the same high school cheer squad, and even once dreamed of moving to New York to chase fashion together. Even though life took us down different paths, me becoming a pediatric nurse and Madison studying marketing, in my heart she was always the sister I never had. First crushes, heartbreaks, those late-night tears over exams. I shared everything with Madison and she did the same with me. So when I met Ethan Walker at a charity gala for the hospital, Madison was the first person I told. Ethan looked like someone who'd stepped off a magazine cover. Tall, handsome, his suit tailored to perfection. He worked at his family's finance company, the kind of profession my parents always approved of. He knew how to make conversation, noticed small details, and the moment he handed me a glass of wine to replace my soda that had lost its ice, I felt a level of thoughtfulness I rarely found in men. Madison grinned when she heard me talk about him. "Alexis, it sounds like you've walked into a romance movie." I blushed, heart pounding, and honestly in the months that followed life really did feel like a movie. Our first dates were simple. Dinner at a tiny Italian place, walks around the lake. Soon we were taking weekend trips, then moving into a bright apartment near the city center. My family adored him from the moment they met him. My father praised Ethan for being such a good listener. My mother loved how he asked sweet questions about her book club, and even my notoriously hard-to-impress younger brother Noah invited Ethan to his weekly poker night with his closest friends. I thought, this is the man I could spend my life with. Of course, Madison seemed thrilled for me. She threw her arms around me when Ethan proposed on Christmas Eve, tears sparkling under the tree lights. She screamed over the phone, "Oh my God, it's finally happening. Alexis, you deserve to be happy. I'm going to be the best maid of honor in history." Madison jumped straight into wedding prep. She went dress shopping with me, argued with florists, and taste-tested so many cakes that we both got sick of frosting. To me, no one but Madison deserved to stand beside me on my big day. But over time, certain small details began to unsettle me. Madison started showing up at my and Ethan's apartment more than seemed necessary. At first, I brushed it off. She helped me package wedding favors for guests, discussed decor with Ethan while I worked night shifts at the hospital. But gradually, those little drop-bys became oddly frequent. One day, I came home earlier than expected and found Madison sitting with Ethan in the living room. Both of them were so quiet that when I opened the door, they jumped. I forced a smile and asked, "Wow, what are you two discussing so seriously?" Madison replied instantly, her voice breezy, "We're going over the budget. You know Ethan handles investment stuff and I'm in marketing. We figured teaming up could save your wedding money." I kept telling myself how lucky I was to have such a devoted friend like Madison. But that night, lying next to Ethan, I noticed how he kept holding his phone, turning the screen face down every time a message came through. Then another night during a shift, my phone buzzed at 2 a.m. A message from Madison, "Thinking about you. Hope you're okay. Sleep well." I wondered why she texted me at that hour, and what she meant by, "Hope you're okay." I was simply at work. Nothing was wrong. When I casually asked her the next day, Madison laughed, "Oh, I stay up late. I missed you and texted. Don't overthink. Maybe I trusted too easily." I waved it off, kept working, and convinced myself her late-night texts were harmless habits. But deep down, tiny cracks had begun to appear in the perfect world I thought I had. One evening at dinner with friends, I noticed Ethan's eyes lingered on Madison longer than they should have. No one else seemed aware, but I saw it. That wasn't a random glance. It was a familiar gaze practiced too many times. I swallowed my anxiety, telling myself I was probably stressed from wedding planning. Madison had changed. She knew Ethan was allergic to pollen, Yet every visit she brought fresh flowers to brighten the house. She called Ethan to urgently ask about some imaginary marketing contract, even though her job had nothing to do with finance. Sometimes, I caught Ethan smiling at his phone, a half-hidden, almost shy smile he didn't give anyone else. One night I joked, "You two get along so well. Maybe I should worry about losing you." Ethan laughed and wrapped his arm around me. "What are you talking about, Alexis? You're the only one I care about." Sweet words, but his eyes darted away like he was hiding something. I wanted to believe him, but my heart had already started ringing a silent alarm. I told myself, "You're being paranoid. No best friend would ever betray you like that, right?" But the real storm was only just beginning. I noticed stronger warning signs one night while reviewing our joint account. Among the incoming bills were some strange expenses. A hotel room in Chicago charged to Ethan's card, even though he told me he was on a business trip in Dallas. Then a purchase at a high-end jewelry store, one I'd never been to. When I asked, he smiled lightly and said it was a surprise gift for later, but his eyes avoided mine. Then I spotted a charge from an obstetrics clinic, something that had absolutely nothing to do with our medical history. At first, I tried to convince myself I was overthinking. But then one morning while taking out the trash, I found a discarded pregnancy test box buried inside a plastic bag. My heart pounded, my hands shook so badly the plastic nearly fell out of my grip. When I brought it up, Ethan swore he knew nothing, while Madison cheerfully jumped in saying it must have belonged to her cousin, who visited the day before. She spoke so smoothly that if I weren't a nurse, I might have believed her. But my job trained me to catch details. That box was sold only at a drugstore a few blocks from us, where Madison often stopped after work. As I watched Madison's forced smile, something in my chest tightened. I finally realized, no one could tell me not to worry anymore. My instincts were screaming. Something was happening right behind my back. I remember that night vividly. After Ethan fell asleep, I sat alone in the living room, a cup of tea gone cold in my hand. I thought about my young patients. I always watched for their tiniest changes so I could act quickly. Yet here I was, ignoring all the obvious signs in my own life. The realization made me shiver. I quietly started gathering evidence. I paid attention whenever Ethan drank water and secretly kept the glass, placing it in a plastic bag so I could use it later for a possible DNA sample. I found a few strands of blonde hair on the pillow in the living room, even though my hair is brown and Ethan's is black. Madison so happens to have striking blonde hair. I carefully clipped those strands into a small envelope and hid it at the bottom of my nightstand drawer. From that moment on, I decided to record conversations. One time, I heard Ethan in the kitchen, his voice tense. "Madison, you need to be more careful. Alexis isn't stupid." I froze behind the bedroom door. The exchange was short, a few muttered words, but it was enough for me to know I was no longer imagining things. Another day, Madison stopped by while I was getting ready for a night shift. She brought a paper bag, saying it had a few things to adjust for the wedding. As I stepped out to grab my coat, I heard her whispering on the phone. "He promised me. After the wedding, he'll handle things with me. We need to keep Alexis from getting more suspicious." Each day, more details piled up. I saw Ethan withdrawing cash more often, sometimes disappearing for hours with no explanation. Once I asked him about it. He only smiled. "I'm handling company matters. Don't worry." The safety I once clung to whenever he was near had vanished without a trace. All I saw were layers of defenses. During another family dinner, my mother asked, "Alexis, how do you think Madison's doing lately? She's helped so much. I really adore her." I forced a smile. "Yes, Madison's doing fine, Mom." But inside me, suspicion churned like an undercurrent. Back at the hospital, I went to a friend in the lab. I didn't tell her everything, handed over the hair sample and asked for DNA testing against items I'd secretly collected from Ethan. I knew I was crossing a dangerous line, but I also knew that if I didn't uncover the truth, I would live forever in doubt. While waiting for the results, I couldn't sleep well. Every glance between Ethan and Madison felt like a knife slicing straight into my trust. I began remembering every detail I had dismissed. Midnight texts, shy smiles, times Ethan said he was busy, but came home with a shirt that smelled like unknown perfume. One day I decided to act to test them. I pretended to forget a shift and came home early. As I opened the door, I heard soft laughter in the living room, followed by hurried movements as if someone was cleaning up. Madison appeared first, her cheeks flushed. "Oh, Alexis." I stopped by to grab some wedding paperwork. Ethan was helping me go over it. Ethan came out afterward, his collar slightly rumpled. He smiled awkwardly. "You're home early? I was going to text you to eat dinner out." I said nothing. But inside me, a new determination formed. I would not let myself become a fool at my own wedding. That night, after Ethan fell asleep, I opened the drawer and looked at the envelope holding the hair, the glass, and the phone with recorded files. Piece by piece, I knew a cruel picture was forming, but I needed the truth no matter how painful. My life was about to turn in a completely different direction. I wasn't going to wait for someone to tell me. I would find the answers myself, and let them destroy each other in the trap I was building day by day. My family always seemed to favor Ethan, and I felt it more clearly every day. Because he came from a wealthy finance family in Dallas. Privileged, educated, poised. Every time he appeared at family dinners, my parents almost forgot I was sitting there at all. My mother would beam whenever Ethan asked about the book she was reading or smoothly recalled the names of everyone in her book club. Sometimes I tried to join the conversation, but my voice seemed to dissolve into thin air. Once, when I gave my opinion about the wedding flowers, my mother immediately turned to Ethan and Madison and asked, "What do you two think? Your ideas seem more sensible." Madison sat there, glowing, her blue eyes shining even brighter whenever my mother praised her. I will never forget the time my mother said, "Madison truly is your right hand, Alexis. Without her, we wouldn't know how to manage anything." It was a simple comment, but it left a scratch inside me. I was her daughter, the bride in this wedding, yet the one being trusted completely was Madison. During family dinners, Ethan and Madison often exchanged brief glances. They thought I didn't notice, but with a nurse's instinct, I saw every furrowed brow and fleeting smile. Their eyes were no longer accidental, they were like a private code. One evening at dinner, my father talked about a fishing trip he was planning for the weekend. Ethan laughed and promised he would go. Madison immediately chimed in, "Don't forget to bring the fishing rod I helped pick out last time." I had no idea they'd gone shopping for fishing gear together. The whole table laughed warmly. I sat still, gripping my spoon until my knuckles turned white. After that dinner, I stepped out onto the back porch to steady myself. Sydney, my younger sister, followed me. She said softly, "Sis, I think something's off." "You feel it too?" "It isn't just me imagining it." Sydney nodded, her voice small. "I don't like how Madison looks at Ethan. But Mom trusts her so much. Whatever you say now, no one will listen." I hugged her, my heart aching but grateful that at least one person saw the truth. The closer it got to the wedding, the worse things became. Madison showed up at my house as if she were the one getting married. She and Ethan discussed wedding details so much that my mother once said, "Alexis, you really are lucky to have Madison. She can handle everything. All you need to do is be the bride." I forced a laugh, but inside I felt a fracture I couldn't describe. I was being pushed out of my own life. One afternoon, I came home early after a shift. The apartment was quiet, but as I approached the living room, I heard soft laughter. I stopped. Ethan's voice, "We have to be more careful. Alexis is getting suspicious." Madison's voice answered, soft but clear, "Don't worry. She always wants to believe the best. Leave it to me." I froze, heart shattering, then quietly backed away and pretended I wasn't home yet. That night, I lay beside Ethan, listening to him breathe steadily in his sleep, while my mind spiraled with questions that had no answers. The next day, when I tried to bring it up, Ethan smiled, brushing my hair. "You're overthinking again. You've been working too much, you're just tired." Madison laughed brightly, patting my shoulder. "Alexis, don't let wedding stress get to you. Trust me, everything's fine." I couldn't tell what was real anymore. I saw clearly that they were hiding something, yet the entire world around me seemed to be complicit through silence or ignorance. I began to feel isolated inside my own family. At dinner, they mentioned Madison more than me. Whenever I tried offering ideas, the response was always, "Let Ethan and Madison handle it, you just rest." Feeling like an outsider in my own wedding was excruciating. I went to work with a fake smile, came home with watchful eyes, and went to bed with a heavy heart. During those days, I felt myself being worn down. I wanted to scream the truth into the light, but also wanted to stay silent to keep observing. And in that silence their masks slowly slipped, yet no one but me seemed to notice. I knew that if I remained silent, I would become a puppet in the show they were staging. I once believed love could heal, that a best friend would never betray you, but what happened forced me to wake up. I wanted the truth. I demanded justice. And above all, I was determined to regain control of my life. I started by contacting a private detective named Mark Jensen. He was a former police officer with a small office in the suburbs. I remember clearly our first meeting. He looked at me with eyes accustomed to lies, then asked bluntly, "Do you want the truth or just enough evidence to walk away?" "I want both. But first I need the truth." Mark handed me a list of what he needed: Ethan's schedule, credit card numbers, backup email addresses. I never expected to have the courage to provide them, but with every line I wrote down, my heart felt a little lighter, as if I had begun untying the ropes that were binding me. At the same time I went to Noah, my older brother. Noah used to be a lawyer but later quit to open a small coffee shop. When I told him about my suspicions, his eyes darkened. "Alexis, are you sure? This is serious. If Ethan is really doing this, you need to be ready for a legal battle." "I'm not suspicious anymore, Noah. I already have pieces of the puzzle. I need you to help me so when the time comes I won't be alone." "Okay. If you're ready, I'll stand by you." I began living two parallel lives. During the day, I still smiled at work in the hospital, caring for children and answering congratulations about my upcoming wedding. But at night, I became someone else, the woman silently planning for the truth to come to light. I bought a tiny hidden camera and carefully placed it in the living room of the apartment. I didn't expect much at first. Maybe I'd catch a few suspicious snippets if I were lucky. But within a week, I had something far beyond my expectations. One evening, Ethan and Madison were sitting in the living room thinking I was at a night shift. They were arguing, their voices tense, no longer guarded. Madison nearly screamed, "You have to take responsibility. If this baby is yours, you can't keep running away like this." Ethan gritted his teeth, slamming his hand down on the table. "And what if it's not mine? Madison, you know how messy this is." I sat in my car in the parking lot, playing back the audio on my phone, my hand gripping the steering wheel until it went numb. This had moved far beyond mere suspicion. It was truth, raw and filthy, right inside the home where I thought I'd start a family. I stored the video on a hard drive and sent a copy to Noah. He called me right after watching it. "Alexis, you were right. They won't be able to deny this." But I didn't stop there. I knew if I had only proof of the affair, Ethan and Madison could still spin it, blaming drunken mistakes or weak moments. I needed more. I began checking every transaction from our joint account. It turned out Ethan had withdrawn cash multiple times, tens of thousands of dollars, routing it through hard-to-trace accounts. Mark helped me investigate and found that part of that money was used to pay off debts in Madison's name. Rage surged inside me, but instead of exploding, I chose patience. I had decided I wouldn't scream. I'd let them believe I was still naive and blind. And then, at the very place everyone thought I'd be my happiest, the wedding, I would let them bury themselves with what they had done. To make that possible, I needed a third person, trustworthy and with authority. I remembered Detective Ramirez, an investigator I once worked with when caring for an abused child. He was a quiet man, but his eyes were unshakable. I met him at a small cafe near the hospital. Ramirez listened without much expression. When I placed a USB containing the video of Ethan and Madison on the table, he pushed it back toward me and said, "What do you want me to do with this?" I took a deep breath, my hands slightly shaking. "I want you to hold on to it. But don't take any action until the wedding day. I need everyone to witness the truth." He raised an eyebrow. "You understand you're choosing to expose them publicly, not take them to court? I want them to pay, not only with legal consequences but by losing the masks they've worn for so long. I want them to know what it feels like to be stripped bare in front of the very people who trusted them." "All right. But you need to be prepared. The price of truth is never cheap." Every time Madison pretended to be affectionate, every time Ethan put his arm around me in front of others, I had to bite my lip not to laugh bitterly. They thought I was blind. They had no idea I was turning every step they took, every word they spoke, into evidence. One night at dinner, Madison casually said, "Ethan, remember next week we have to meet the florist." I looked up and smiled gently. Yes, Madison, make sure you jot that down for me. You're so good at that. Her eyes flickered and Ethan's brows tightened slightly. I knew they were starting to get nervous, yet still believed I suspected nothing. Every night I sat alone reworking my plan. I filed all the evidence under categories: finances, infidelity, deceit. I made 3 copies, hiding them in 3 different places. I told Noah, if anything happens, you must be the one to bring everything to light. He squeezed my hand. Alexis, you won't be alone. I looked in the mirror and saw a different face. Not a dreamy bride, but a woman preparing for battle. A battle I never expected to fight, but now the only path to protect myself and my dignity. The night before the wedding, I went back to my parents' house to stay with Sydney and a few close friends. I hoped for a peaceful night, far from the suffocating apartment full of secrets. But that very night I accidentally overheard a conversation that made my heart sink again. I was passing my father's study on my way to the kitchen when I heard my parents' voices. The door was ajar, enough for me to hear clearly. My mother's voice was low but strained. Henry, you think I don't notice? Madison's in Alexis's house more than she should be. I see the way Ethan watches her. No man stares at a little sister with that kind of hunger. My father sighed heavily, the sound of his hand tapping the wooden desk. I know. But we can't do anything right now. Tomorrow's the wedding. Everything's ready, hundreds of guests, relatives flying in. If we stir things up now, what happens to our family's reputation? My mother answered, her voice breaking. Reputation? What about your daughter's happiness? Look at Alexis lately, she's lost weight, dark circles under her eyes, she knows something. And we're letting it happen. So they had seen the signs. I wasn't the only one. But instead of protecting me, they chose silence to preserve appearances. My father spoke softly, but each word cut like a knife. If there's an issue, we'll deal with it after the wedding. Once it's done, things will settle. My mother didn't reply. I heard a chair scrape sharply, as if she stood up and left the room. I pressed myself against the wall, not wanting them to know I was listening. When she walked past, I caught a glimpse of her eyes, red and wet. I went back to my room, closed the door and leaned against it, shaking. Sydney was on the bed, scrolling her phone. She looked up. Are you okay? Yeah, just a little tired. But inside I felt like the air had been sucked from my lungs. My parents, the ones I believed would always shield me, had also chosen to look away. I felt a loneliness so sharp it hurt to breathe. And yet, a sharper thought ignited inside me. If they didn't dare to speak up, then I would. Not for myself, but for this entire family, to prove that truth cannot stay buried beneath a fake sense of honor. The next morning, while I was getting my makeup done, my mother came into the room. She adjusted my veil, her hands trembling slightly. My girl, today is a very important day. Whatever happens, please stay calm, all right? I looked in the mirror, meeting her eyes in the reflection, eyes that wanted to say more than she could voice. I nodded gently. Throughout the morning, Madison acted busier than the bride herself. She scurried around adjusting flowers, checking the reception tables, while Ethan stayed right by her side, as if the two of them were co-directing a major event. Every time I tried to step in, they threw me a polite smile. Don't worry, Alexis, we've got this. At noon, I found my father out on the porch. He was smoking a cigar, eyes distant. I walked up. Dad, if you know something, why won't you tell me? He hesitated, then set the cigar down in the ashtray. Alexis, I want everything to go smoothly. I don't want your big day to turn into a laughingstock. Tears welled in my eyes, but I swallowed them, keeping my voice calm. Dad, the truth already is a joke. You don't want to see it yet. He turned away, shoulders trembling, but said nothing more. In that moment, I understood I was entirely alone in this plan. My family, out of fear of public scrutiny, would never take my side. But that very loneliness made me stronger. I felt my heart grow colder, and at the same time steadier than ever. That night, after the whole house had gone to sleep, I opened my laptop and replayed the video of Ethan and Madison arguing. Madison's voice crackled through the headphones. You have to take responsibility. If this baby is yours, you can't leave me. I stared at their deceitful faces and whispered to myself, tomorrow, everyone will see. No one will be able to deny it. The moment Madison blurted, I'm pregnant and Ethan is the father, the entire church held its breath. Whispering erupted in the back pews like rising waves, all eyes drilling into me, waiting to see how I would crumble. But instead of collapsing, I tightened my grip on my bouquet and smiled. Not the smile of a betrayed bride, but of a woman who had prepared for this moment for a very long time. I stepped toward the microphone, my voice ringing out clearly. If she wants a stage, I'll give her one. I pressed a button hidden in my bouquet. Instantly, Madison's shrill, smug voice blasted through the speakers. God, Ethan is so dumb. He doesn't even know I'm still sleeping with Connor. Oh, and Daniel Scott too. But Ethan has the most money, so of course I picked him to be this baby's dad. Lifetime free insurance. Gasps echoed beneath the vaulted ceiling. People clapped hands to their mouths. Oh my God, spreading like wildfire. Connor, Ethan's younger brother, stood pale and frozen among the groomsmen. His fiancée, Rachel, eyes bulging, suddenly dropped to the floor as guests rushed to catch her. Ethan's mother broke down sobbing, clutching her husband's arm like the world might collapse. Ethan fell to his knees on the altar, face as white as a sheet, lips moving but unable to speak. I didn't let the silence linger. I pulled an envelope from my bouquet, opened it, and held up a DNA report, the coldness in my voice echoing across the church. And here, the proof. The baby Madison is bragging about is not Ethan's. The father is Connor Walker. The room exploded. People shouted, women screamed. Rachel was carried out. Mr. and Mrs. Walker looked thunderstruck as if lightning had struck indoors. Connor stumbled backward. No way. Madison, tell me she's lying. Madison tried to recover. Connor, don't believe her. Alexis made this up because she's jealous. She wants to humiliate me. Then explain why your voice is on that recording. Why the DNA matches. Or are you saying the lab is part of my conspiracy? The crowd laughed cruelly, hurling curses. One of my aunts shouted prayers and insults in a mix of Spanish and English. Madison shook, trying to reach Ethan, but he shoved her away, eyes bloodshot. What did you do to my brother? Daniel Scott? God. Ethan was berated. Madison was eyed like a venomous snake. My father's face turned red with both anger and heartbreak. My mother cried into her hands. Sydney and Noah rushed to my sides like guards. Madison collapsed, clutching at my dress, her voice cracked. Alexis, let me explain. I was pressured. I didn't mean for this. No, Madison. You wanted everything. And now you'll lose everything. At that moment I saw Daniel Scott, Ethan's boss, sitting in the front row, face purple with rage, hands trembling. His wife turned and slapped him so hard the sound echoed. He staggered to his feet, scrambling to escape under the furious eyes of hundreds. Ethan clutched his knees, whispering crazily, No, this can't be, it's just a nightmare. For the first time I saw cowardice down to his bones. The great man my family once praised was now nothing but an empty shell. Voices swelled. Phones came out, people live-streamed, texting frantically. I heard someone whisper, this is going to be in the news. Biggest scandal of the century. I inhaled deeply, stepping back. I had done exactly what I set out to do, make their masks fall in front of everyone. And once the light hit those traitors, they had nowhere left to hide. The church erupted into chaos. Shouting, crying, phones flashing. Then suddenly the heavy doors burst open with a loud bang. A commanding voice cut through the noise. Ethan Carter, Madison Lane, you are under arrest for financial fraud, identity theft, and embezzlement. All heads turned. Detective Ramirez stood at the end of the aisle with 4 uniformed officers. The red and blue lights from the patrol cars outside flickering through stained glass, turning the sacred space into something straight from a crime movie. Madison screamed, this is a mistake. You have no right to do this to me. Ethan trembled, pale as death, still trying to hold on to his treacherous fiancée to salvage a shred of dignity. I handed Ramirez the file I had been guarding. Here is supplementary evidence. Ethan forged my signature to take out a second mortgage. $75,000. The bank has confirmed everything. Ramirez glanced quickly through the file, then motioned for 2 officers to handcuff Ethan. The cold click of metal snapping around his wrists felt like the final period on all the lies I had ever been forced to endure. Ethan's mother lunged forward, trying to shield her son. No. This is his wedding. How dare you turn it into an arrest scene? Ramirez answered calmly. Ma'am, justice doesn't pick a time or place. When the truth comes to light, action must be taken immediately. Madison shrieked, hair wild, makeup streaking down her face. You'll all regret this. A few guests came up to me. You did the right thing. You're incredibly brave. My eyes followed Ethan as he was led outside. His back was hunched, stripped of every ounce of the man who once promised to protect me. He looked over his shoulder, pleading silently, but no words came from his mouth. The church stayed in uproar. People filmed, whispered, even snickered as Madison was dragged away in her once pristine wedding gown now stained with mud from the yard. But inside me there was a strange calm. Ramirez turned to me, his eyes both stern and warm. You stood your ground. Not many have that kind of courage. In the middle of chaos, I knew I had chosen the right path. The path of truth, of justice, and of liberation. I never imagined that the most painful moment of my life could become the beginning of a brand new journey. After my wedding turned crime scene, my name appeared on every newspaper and website. At first, the attention was exhausting. But then the messages filling my inbox weren't insults. They were empathy and encouragement. The hashtag Wedding Revenge Bride was everywhere. Someone wrote, "She did what so many women wish they had the courage to do." Another message said, "You inspired me to walk away from a marriage built on lies." I realized my story was no longer a private humiliation. It had touched thousands of women trapped between betrayal and silence. A week later, I was invited onto a morning talk show. The host asked, "Do you regret exposing everything on what was supposed to be your happiest day?" If I had stayed silent, I would have lived in a marriage built on deceit and exploitation. I chose truth even when truth hurts. After that show, my email blew up with book offers, speaking requests, asking me to talk about how women can protect themselves not just emotionally but financially. I never thought I'd stand on stage sharing my own pain, yet the grateful eyes of women in the audience gave me strength. I sold the apartment I used to share with Ethan, along with every fake memory it held. Holding the keys to my new home, a small house in Denver, I took a deep breath. For the first time in months, I could breathe freely. The house wasn't big, but it was completely mine. I adopted a husky and named him Atlas. "You'll carry the sky for me, okay?" I laughed as I hugged him. With Atlas, my once lonely evenings filled with tiny footsteps and bright, loyal eyes. During the day, I returned to school for my master's in pediatric nursing. People asked, "After all this, why not chase fame? Why go back to studying so hard?" I answered, "I want a life built on real value, not just the spotlight." I'll never forget my first day back in class when the professor introduced me. "You might have seen her on the news, but here she's your peer walking this academic journey beside you." I felt relieved to be seen as a person, not just the revenge bride. Alongside school, I used part of the money from selling my old home to start a small foundation. I called it the Phoenix Fund. Every time I got an email saying, "My husband emptied my bank account," or "My boyfriend tricked me into signing loan papers," I remembered myself. With volunteers, I helped women with legal guidance, therapy referrals, or simply by listening. One night, Emma, a woman in her 40s we'd just helped escape debt left by her ex, called me. Her voice trembled. "Without you, I would have lost my house. Thank you for not letting me fall." Each morning, I walked Atlas through my snowy neighborhood, mountains rising in the distance. I was no longer the woman abandoned at the altar, not Ethan's shadow. I was me standing on my own soil, walking my own new road. 1 year later, I went to Italy. I had promised myself that when everything ended, I would visit Amalfi, the place I pictured with bright white cliffs, narrow paths to the sea, and sunsets that melted like gold over water. Now here I stood, breathing salty wind as my body finally relaxed. In my hand, my phone buzzed with a message from my lawyer. "Ethan and Madison officially sentenced to 5 years. No early release." I stared at the words for a long time, as if an old wound had finally scarred over. I sat on a small wooden bench by the rocks, sunset lighting my shoulders. An elderly Italian couple passed by. The wife waved, "Bella Sera, signora." I smiled back. The husband glanced at the sea, then said, "They say anyone who comes to Amalfi at sunset carries a story they're ready to close." His words struck a perfect chord in my heart. I didn't need to explain, but somehow they understood. They walked on and I stayed, letting the waves swallow the last pieces of memory. Atlas sat beside me, resting his chin on my leg as if to say, "Look how far we've come." I stroked his fur, whispering, "Yes, we're okay now." That night, I dined alone at a cliffside trattoria. The owner, a silver-haired woman with a kind smile, chatted with me. When she learned I was traveling solo, she tilted her head. "Not lonely?" I sipped my wine, watching boat lights sparkle across the sea. "No. I was lonely once, surrounded by people even on my wedding day. But I'm free. Freedom is rare. Guard it with your life." Her words stayed with me all the way back to the hotel. In the bathroom mirror, I looked at my own face, not abandoned, not betrayed, but reborn. A woman who chose truth, freedom, and herself. When I opened the window, sea wind rushed in, the sound of waves whispering around me as if to say, "They thought they buried me on my wedding day. But I wasn't the bride they destroyed. I was the woman who rose from the ashes." Every painful step, every betrayal, every fall, had led me here. Standing between sea and sky with the future wide open, I no longer needed anyone to define my worth. Standing on the Amalfi Coast, watching the sun sink into the sea as I read the message about Ethan and Madison's sentencing, I suddenly realized, life isn't a chain of petty victories. Sometimes justice comes not to fuel revenge, but to let us move forward with a lighter heart. I chose to smile, not because they fell, but because I finally learned to choose myself. Freedom doesn't come from watching others crumble, but from the moment we dare to release the weight that once held us down. What about you? If you were in my position, would you choose forgiveness, silence, or would you stand up and expose the truth? I truly want to hear your thoughts, because every story reflects the journey we've each walked through life. If this story resonates with you, please leave a comment below. And don't forget to follow the channel so we can continue this journey together, with more stories about family, choices, and the powerful ways we find strength within ourselves.